All right, listen to what this lady's about to say.
We have a lot of people in our generation nowadays that are homeless, and it's really sad because people think that it's funny, and it's really not. And nowadays it's really hard to get your shit together, but this poor guy Toby, this is an honor for Toby.
17 years old.
Y'all donate $10 a day for Toby. He gotta get his shit together, man.
It's big boy shit.
So I figured we can dive into the topic of this video while I set up a new board. I just got an 8/8 from the local skate shop, local board. I'll talk about this. Got some Santa Cruz rails, super hyped on. I got some OJ Elites because I've been loving these 56 millimeters. And then I got some nice wide grip, clear grip, and some black grip, really wide. I'm gonna do some grip tape art. While we dive into the topic of this video, skate brands, exploiting skaters' substance abuse. Unfortunately, I am gonna have to poke at some skate brands in order to really solidify my message throughout this video. But first things first, let's get this board open. There's one sticker I need to place on here. I'm normally not a sticker kind of person, but you'll get why. On this board, there's someone like drinking and smoking up here, so I'm just gonna put a sticker over it. I've been reading this book called Wanting that goes into the power of mimic desire in everyday life. Essentially, it's a deep dive into why we desire what we do and why we do the things that we do. The reason that I think it's important to bring this up in the beginning of the video is because I don't want this video to come across as shaming, or more importantly, shaming individuals. What I'm about to discuss isn't one person or one brand's fault. Now, I don't think this is like an isolated situation just for skateboarders. You can say the same thing about music culture, rock and roll, different things. However, I do think that we've adopted a mimic desire in an interesting, sort of toxic way. Speaking for myself, the people and the brands that I was inspired by are the ones that felt authentic and raw. As a young kid, I hated the idea of drinking or smoking or anything in that nature, to be completely honest. My point is that I didn't desire things like drug or alcohol until I was older. This is important because a lot of skaters tend to believe this substance abuse issue is what naturally pulls people into skateboarding. While that might be true for some, it's not for me. Sure, I come from somewhat of a broken home, did display substance abuse, but I started skating to escape all that, not to partake in it. As time went on, obviously I sort of accepted and adopted what was the cool thing to do, and the cool kids. I wanted to be accepted, so I started drinking, started smoking, started partaking so that you know, I didn't feel socially awkward, and I feel like I can partake in these settings, which wasn't good now in retrospect. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I didn't enjoy those things. I didn't think they were cool until certain people were doing them. They showed me that they were cool and I wanted to be associated with that, so then I started doing them. Very inspired, essentially. We should train ourselves to avoid making the same mistakes that our elders did. Long story short, I no longer drink alcohol with the exception of special occasions, so now I gotta put my rails on there. We got our rails on there, nice and tight. Got our grip tape on there, trucks are on. Last thing I need to do before we get a little warm-up session, we dive further into the topic of this video, put on my OJ Elites. I've made a review about these wheels, comparing them to Spitfire, doing flat spots tests. Honestly, I've been finding these to be my favorite so far. Is the Elite urethane. They got a whole shape guide on the back, which is pretty good. They ride good. They're good for the type of material that, you know, I like to ride. Crusty ditch spots, skate parks, a little bit of everything. Now, if you're wondering how my wheel is doing, so far it hasn't fallen off. In the previous video, my wheel has fallen off. I've had issues with the bolt staying on the Ace AF1 hollow trucks. But so far, now that I swapped the bolt out, added a tiny bit of Loctite, I haven't had any issues. So fingers crossed that the problem is solved. I mean, I don't know if I'm getting axle slip, but that's what it seems like. And these are pretty new. Like, I've had these for a month now. You know, like, there's wiggle room and still some thread on this side, but this side, no more thread, and it's snug. All right, there we have it. Freshie setup. Feels good, like these big wheels, nice chunky rails. Got that 8/8 on there, and my 66s, to me, they fit perfect. I'm hyped on them. I mean, they could be a tiny bit wider, but any more wide would actually be problematic. So I'm gonna go break this board in as we dive more into the topic of this video. I'm going to pick up a Thrasher magazine with no idea what's inside, just to see if I can solidify this point by flipping through it.
Eric didn't just land his fakie flip with only van headlights, he was hammered drunk. Woohoo!
Now, in my opinion, I think brands are responsible for substance abuse in skaters, and the reason I think they're responsible is because the products and the marketing. Those are the two things that I think really do elevate the substance abuse and sort of encourages skaters to use substance so they can fit in essentially. So one example is products, right? A lot of brands will put smoking or drinking on a product. I covered this board because it had someone smoking and drinking in the same scenario, so I just put a sticker over it. And the point that I did that is because I don't want to be a part of that promoting of substance. So like board graphics, products, when they have that on there, like someone drinking or someone smoking, it sort of encourages the user to partake in that. So I think the overarching point is that we don't need to put substance abuse within products or marketing videos. That is the big part. So I talked about products, now let's talk about marketing. In general, typically what a lot of skate companies do is they make videos to promote their products or to promote their team or to just promote everything in general. Like skateboarding has a lot to do with videos, and if you look at videos, a lot of times it's like the B-roll is smoking and drinking, and then like very, very common is that someone's shotgunning a beer or chugging a beer after they landed a really sick, gnarly trick. Now, I'm not saying like you shouldn't be maybe doing that stuff. That's not so much what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it shouldn't be amplified and shouldn't be considered cool. So a little quick update on the Ace AF1s. I'm pretty sure I am getting some axle slip because just now one of my wheels was really loose and the other one was really tight. With this entire situation of displaying skater substance abuse is that it creates an identity of said skater, and then they have to like kind of continue this facade of who people think they are regardless of how they feel or who they think they're becoming. So I think it's really harsh because I mean you could look at like companies like Baker. I think it's a good example. They were obviously coming from the whole piss drunks kind of army and stuff, and it was like a lot of drinking. But look at Spanky, look at Andrew Rules, like they're killing it, they're sober, and the brand has changed and warped. And don't get me wrong, like they can still be that cool brand that they always were, but I think they're more self-aware and conscious of what they put out, and I think that's really cool. This is extremely isolating, like this whole situation for skaters in particular if they're going through this. And you know, substance abuse sits pretty close to depression and can create a slippery slope of losing one's self-worth, and I think that can be very problematic, especially if they're like trying to keep up with this facade. So there are brands out there that are doing a good job of putting policy into place and placing accountability on substance abuse. And you know, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to be like the Olympics and drug test skaters or make skaters like confined to one way of thinking. Like it's not football, right? Like that's why we love skateboarding. But I just think we don't have to promote it. We don't have to publicize it. We don't have to glorify drinking and smoking or cigarettes or drugs, whatever it is. We don't have to glorify it, but we can still do it. So I guess that's kind of the point ultimately what this video is like getting at is, you know, I'm not saying we need to control skaters or tell people what to do, but I don't think it's healthy to build identity for skaters based off substance abuse, and especially when brands do that. I think it becomes very problematic, and ultimately skaters should be able to do whatever they want. They should make their own decisions, and putting them in a position that doesn't allow them to grow. This isn't to like make skaters be the victim. Don't get me wrong, that's like not the intention of this. It's more just to draw attention to it, because there are skaters out there that have recovered and went to dark places. Brandon Turner is a good example. He's my friend, you know, and now he has like a recovery program. That's really cool, really dope. But obviously the reality is that you have to have resources and money to be able to go to these rehab centers that they really do help you. So if we can avoid people having to go there in general, I think it's better, because ultimately it takes a really special person to make it through that process, and there's definitely not a million Brandon Turners in the world. And I guess what I'm ultimately getting at is that, like, you know, we don't want skaters to have to go to that place. We should learn from Brandon, learn from all these different people that are very knowledgeable and self-aware of what substance abuse does to people.
There's a place so close, can't deny. Shut my eyes, love is blind.
So obviously I don't want to just sit here and dish out like criticism on the skate industry because I love skateboarding, I love the culture, I'm here, I'm for it. I've been involved with this my entire life. Something I've been trying to do lately is like go to the skate park and do like 3 tricks that I'm really stoked on and happy about. That nose blunt, I've never done a backside nose blunt. That was the first one I've ever done on like something that I consider real. I've done it on like little things, but that's like the coolest thing I've ever done it on. And now I feel like I could do the back nose blunt, switch front blunt out, maybe if I take some time to do it. But the point is I'm trying to build more quality content on this channel. So sorry if I'm not posting as much, but hopefully you do enjoy when I do post and it just has a little more of an impact. That's the goal. So a couple things that I had thought about for brands that can take away, and I don't want this to be an insult to any brands because I do know people that work for almost every brand that I've mentioned actually, and this isn't like an attack on them. This is simply to like maybe to have some positive change that comes from this video. That's always my goal. And remember, you can support me by joining channel members or just simply liking this video or subscribing if you're not already. I appreciate everyone that supports the channel. So how can brands do better? How can skate brands, the people that work at the brands, how can they really do better? So one example is team managers. I used to be a team manager. I know all about this. You're really kind of the mentor for skaters. So I think one thing that team managers can do is check in with skaters on trips, on anything. If they see someone like getting belligerently drunk, maybe check on them when they're sober, you know, ask them how they're doing. I don't want to use too many examples, but there are examples where there's people on skate trips that later took their life. There's no way going about that. They took their own life because they were in such a dark, deep place. And I don't think it's any one individual's fault. I think they chose that decision. However, I think there's a way to mitigate that train of thought if people are just checking in on each other. So a team manager, I feel like that's your role. If you're managing a team, you should be checking in on everyone. If you see someone that's like drinking absurdly amount and smoking absurdly amount, don't just let them do that because they're stacking footage and getting the marketing material for the brand. Like, think about the better good of the individual versus just thinking about the marketing or thinking about how to crunch the numbers. And I know that's a hard thing because as a team manager, you're employed by the company, you're not employed by the skater, but ultimately skaters got to be looking out for skaters. The next thing I'll go into is kind of like the marketing people, and this is like a general oversweep thing, is just stop promoting substance abuse, whether it be in your copywriting in the magazine, your promotional videos with the B-roll, or even the titles of your videos or the title of your products. Like, let's just do better and not try to promote it. Like, it's that easy in my mind. Just we can be more clever and more creative and more artistic than just like, here we are drinking and smoking. Like, it's very jockish, and skateboarding's not a jock sport. Like, why are we falling in line with like tailgate parties? It's lame. At the end of the day, we just don't need to be telling people that substance abuse is cool or drinking is cool and smoking is cool. That's really what it comes down to. People are gonna think I'm like that old boring guy, but like, honestly, I think about it when I was really young. This is why I wanted to make this video, because when I was really young, like I said in the beginning, I never wanted to drink or smoke any of that, but then eventually I wanted to be accepted by my peer group, so I did it. And, you know, maybe there's a way to mitigate that. That is the ultimate objective. I feel like I'm ranting and repeating myself. I do that sometimes when I'm very passionate about a topic. So I'm sorry, I love you. Now, another one's for anybody that actually has a platform like me, having a YouTube channel. Stop glorifying it. And I know, like, maybe some people will say, hey, you talked about microdosing mushrooms, but in both of those videos where I talked about microdosing mushrooms, I made it very clear it was about cognitive support, and it was not about escaping. It was not about like tripping out. It wasn't about the psychedelic aspect. It was literally about the chemical cells in your body and how psilocybin can play a role in that. It has nothing to do with tripping out. So I want to make that very clear. So again, we don't need to amplify drug use unless it is in a constructive way. And of course, it's a fine line, right? Like, marijuana can help certain people and relieve it. But I guess what I'm saying is like the caption in the thrash where it's like, this guy drank so much and he still landed it. Like, that's the stuff that we just don't need to amplify. Like, you need to medicate so that you can feel better and you can skate better. That's fine, but not everybody needs to know. I think everyone can make a difference in the future. Ultimately, if you have friends that drink, I have friends that drink, I just try to check in on them, tell them I love them, check in, see how they're doing. All right, love y'all. Time to go make some food. Time to make some lunch. These videos have been taking me longer, but I'm enjoying the process more. Let me know if you're enjoying it as well.